Picture this, it's the early 20th century and Libya is under Italian colonization. The Libyan people are living under the heavy hand of a foreign power. The Italians, eager to establish a foothold in North Africa, impose their culture, language, and rule on the Libyan population. Fast forward to 1951, and Libya achieves its long-awaited independence, with King Idris taking the reins of the newly formed kingdom. But the euphoria of independence soon gives way to disillusionment. Oil wealth fails to trickle down to the common people, and King Idris's rule is marked by accusations of corruption and nepotism. The socio-political climate of the time grows increasingly turbulent, creating a breeding ground for discontent and rebellion. Into this volatile mix steps a young military officer, Moammar Gaddafi, who is both a product of his time and a catalyst for change. As the 1960s dawned, a new force emerged on Libya's political scene, a young man named Moammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi, a mere military officer, staged a bloodless coup in 1969, toppling King Idris. A young man of just 27, Gaddafi found himself at the helm of a nation, and he wasted no time in setting forth his vision for the future of Libya. He swiftly declared Libya a republic, ousting the monarchy that had held sway for over 2 decades. But Gaddafi was not content with mere political restructuring. He sought to reshape the very fabric of Libyan society. His political philosophy, as outlined in his Green Book, proposed a sweeping overhaul of economic, political, and societal norms. He championed a form of direct democracy, which he termed Jamahiriya, or the state of the masses. In theory, this meant power was vested directly in the hands of the people, circumventing traditional political institutions. Under Gaddafi's Jamahiriya, local communities held the reins of power, with decisions made at public assemblies known as People's Congresses. This was a radical departure from the traditional hierarchical structures that dominated most of the world at the time. Gaddafi also pursued a series of radical economic reforms, nationalizing oil companies and redistributing wealth in an attempt to create an egalitarian society. But Gaddafi's early days were not all rosy. His rule was marked by a firm hand, and dissent was not tolerated. Critics point to the suppression of political opposition and the curbing of free speech as evidence of his autocratic tendencies. His flamboyant style was also a source of controversy. From his elaborate military uniforms to his all-female bodyguard unit, Gaddafi's eccentricities were a stark contrast to the austere image of a traditional political leader. Yet, despite the controversy, Gaddafi's early days were marked by a sense of optimism and a belief in the possibility of a new kind of society. His vision of a people's republic, though flawed in execution, was a bold attempt to reimagine the way power and wealth were distributed in society. Gaddafi's rule was not without controversy, as he began to show a penchant for the dramatic and flamboyant. His unique blend of political philosophy and personal style would continue to shape Libya's trajectory in the decades to come. As Gaddafi consolidated his power, his rule took a turn for the dramatic. The middle years of his reign were marked by a blend of controversy, reform, and a fair share of international notoriety. Gaddafi's support for international terrorism became increasingly apparent during this period. His government was implicated in numerous acts of terror worldwide, including the infamous Lockerbie bombing. This support for terrorism extended beyond mere financial backing, with Libya also providing training and logistical support for numerous terrorist groups. But it wasn't just his support for terrorism that made headlines. Gaddafi also embarked on a dangerous path of developing weapons of mass destruction. Despite the international outcry and sanctions, he persisted in these endeavors, adding another layer of complexity to Libya's standing in the world stage. However, it's essential to note that Gaddafi's rule wasn't just about controversy. He also made significant strides in economic reform, particularly in oil production. Libya's oil revenues skyrocketed under Gaddafi's leadership, turning the country into one of Africa's wealthiest nations. His focus on oil production allowed him to fund expansive public works projects and social welfare programs, earning him a degree of domestic support despite his controversial international activities. Yet the economic growth didn't mitigate the human rights abuses that were rampant under Gaddafi's rule. Political dissidents were frequently jailed or executed, and the press was heavily censored. The lack of political freedoms and the brutal suppression of dissent painted a stark picture of life under Gaddafi's regime. By the 1990s, Gaddafi was a polarizing figure, revered by some as a champion of the Third World, and reviled by others as a dictator. His middle years, filled with controversy, reform, and terror, set the stage for the dramatic end of his rule, which we'll delve into in the next segment. The winds of change swept through the Arab world in 2011, and Libya was not spared. The phenomenon known as the Arab Spring had begun. It was a series of anti-government protests, uprisings, and rebellions that spread across much of the Arab world. In Libya, the discontent had been bubbling under the surface for years. The people were tired of Gaddafi's iron-fisted rule, of the corruption, and of the economic hardship. It all came to a head in February 2011. Protests erupted in Benghazi, soon spreading to other cities. The people were demanding change, they were demanding freedom, they were demanding Gaddafi's exit. But Gaddafi was not one to go down without a fight. He responded with brutal force, leading to a full-blown civil war. The country was divided, with some regions under the control of the rebels and others still under Gaddafi's iron fist. It was a bloody, brutal, and protracted conflict. The international community watched in horror as the violence escalated. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, decided to intervene. They imposed a no-fly zone over Libya to prevent Gaddafi from bombing his own people. This intervention played a significant role in turning the tide of the war. By August, the rebels had taken control of the capital, Tripoli. Gaddafi, once the all-powerful leader of Libya, was now on the run. His end came in October. He was captured and killed by the rebels in his hometown of Sirte. The man who had ruled Libya with an iron fist for more than 4 decades was now gone. Gaddafi's rule ended as dramatically as it had begun, with his death in the hands of Libyan rebels. His downfall marked the end of an era, but the story of Libya and its people was far from over. Gaddafi may be gone, but his shadow looms large over Libya. The curtain fell on Gaddafi's rule in 2011, but the aftermath has been anything but peaceful. Libya found itself in a power vacuum, a state without a central authority. The power structures that Gaddafi had held together with an iron fist crumbled, sparking a civil war that has rocked the country for over a decade. The absence of Gaddafi's unifying, albeit oppressive, presence led to the rise of a myriad of factions, each vying for control. The country fragmented along tribal and regional lines, a stark contrast to the unity that Gaddafi had enforced. The ensuing power struggle has resulted in ongoing instability, with peace a distant dream for the war-weary people of Libya. But Gaddafi's legacy is not just one of chaos and conflict. He also left an indelible mark on Libya's infrastructure. With the wealth from Libya's vast oil reserves, Gaddafi embarked on ambitious development projects: roads, hospitals, schools. He transformed the face of the nation. Today, these structures stand as a testament to his vision for a modern Libya. Yet, it's impossible to discuss Gaddafi's legacy without acknowledging the dark side of his rule. His regime was marked by human rights abuses. Arbitrary detentions, forced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings were all too common. The fear that Gaddafi instilled in his people still lingers, a chilling reminder of the brutal measures he used to maintain his grip on power. Gaddafi also had a profound impact on Libya's position in the global community. His anti-imperialist stance and support for revolutionary movements around the world earned him both praise and condemnation. His death marked the end of an era, altering the dynamics of international relations in the region. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Gaddafi's legacy is the sense of national identity he fostered. Under his rule, Libya emerged from colonial shadows, carving out its place in the world. Despite the turmoil and oppression, there's a generation of Libyans who remember Gaddafi's era as a time when Libya stood proud and strong. However, this sense of national identity came at a steep cost. Gaddafi's rule was characterized by a systemic suppression of dissent and a pervasive culture of fear. This legacy lingers, complicating efforts to build a democratic and inclusive Libya. So, how do we reconcile the different facets of Gaddafi's legacy? The truth is, we probably can't. His rule was a paradox, marked by progress and repression, unity and division, prosperity and poverty. It's a legacy that continues to shape Libya, for better or worse. In the end, Gaddafi's legacy is as complex and controversial as the man himself, a testament to the enduring impact of his rule on Libya,